There are few things more mysterious and intriguing than wandering through the ruins of a decades or even centuries old lost ghost town that seems to have been frozen in time. No, this footage is not from a movie, and yes, these types of places still actually exist. As a matter of fact, they're all over Texas, and today we're going to explore the top 20 ghost towns in the Lone Star State. Number 20, Lee Day. In 1904, a Mrs. Mabel Day, owner of a large local cattle ranch, staked the town of Lee Day and named it after both her former husband, William H. Day, and her current husband, J.C. Lee, forming the name Lee Day. Soon, the new town had 3 stores, a post office, a 2-story hotel, a school, a cotton gin, a so-called Woodman of the World Hall, whatever that is, a blacksmith shop, and a population of over 100. The town prospered well until soon after World War I. At that point, the coming of the automobile and paved roads meant that Lee Day would now have to compete for its business with other larger towns nearby, and it didn't fare so well. By 1980, the population was down to 55. But the universe still wasn't done picking on Lee Day, and in the early 1990s, a large portion of the original town site, including several roads and buildings, was submerged by the construction of the O.H. Dam. Today, there's relatively little left of this once thriving town. If you try to drive there, you'll find that its former roads lead directly into the lake's beautiful sparkling waters. There are even a few islands here that contain some crumbling, desolate portions of the now abandoned roads leading to the submerged site of this ghost town, and you can only wonder what hidden relics and lost secrets lie at the cold, dark bottom of the lake. Number 19. Pontotoc. Deep in the mountains of central Texas lies a buried story, hopelessly lost in the sands of time. The town of Pontotoc, Texas was formed in the 1850s, and soon it seemed destined for success, with several buildings and businesses. It also had an active mining industry, known primarily for collecting mica and topaz, which abounded in the area. After several decades of prosperity, Pontotoc began to implode. A typhoid fever epidemic nearly wiped out the town in 1887. The town cemetery became so full that it had to be closed in 1888, and a new one was established. Many attempts were made to get a railroad through the community, but each of the 3 proposed railroad lines missed the town by a few miles. A few years later, a disastrous fire took out a good portion of the stores downtown and all but doomed the town to its final demise. Today, only a few remnants of this once proud, prosperous town remain, including several crumbling structures, at least 2 abandoned cemeteries, and this mysterious mine or quarry. Number 18. Concord. What if I told you that there's a sunken ghost town, a little Atlantis, if you will, right here in our very own state of Texas? In fact, there is. Beneath the surface of the beautiful, sparkling Sam Rayburn Reservoir in East Texas hides a centuries-old secret. In the early 1880s, a Colonel T.L. Mott pitched a tent on a river bottom and soon built a cabin for his family. Soon, this small settlement became a town, including a post office, church, school, and several cemeteries. This town actually grew and flourished for several years, eventually becoming home to several hundred residents. However, in the late 1950s, the Army Corps of Engineers began building a dam on the nearby Angelina River. Their plan was to form a large reservoir to mitigate local flooding and enhance nearby property values. The problem? The proposed location for the future reservoir was located over a vast area that included the historic colonial town of Concord, Texas. Concord's families fought the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for as long as they could, but to no avail. In the end, they gave up and watched as the dam builders pulled down their log houses, destroyed their school, moved their church, and dug up the bodies of their ancestors in Concord Cemetery. Now, most of the town, including the site of its old church, is at the bottom of the Sam Rayburn Reservoir. And if you know where to look, you can still find a few traces of the original settlement, including tools, nails, building foundations, and even an abandoned cemetery that just barely managed to stay above water level. Number 17. Aldridge. Deep inside the Angelina National Forest, sitting not too far from the Neches River, you'll find 4 massive structures under the thick forest canopy. These are part of the few ruins that still remain of the sawmill town of Aldridge, a now overgrown ghost town lost deep in the dense forest vegetation. In operation from 1905 to 1923, the Aldridge sawmill was once the pride of the town of Aldridge, its very reason for existing. By 1906, the town of Aldridge had a large commissary, a depot, a hotel, hotel, a dispensary, 2 churches, 2 schools, and 200 tenant houses. However, the town suffered one tragedy after another, including several catastrophic fires, which drove the sawmill out of business. Without the sawmill to boost its economy, the town of Aldridge didn't stand a chance. By 1925, the railroad tracks had been torn up, and the entire site was abandoned for all time. Number 16. Oak Forest. Hidden away on the riverbank of a majestic, peaceful river near the Texas Hill Country lie the ruins of a majestic, overgrown structure that's been frozen in time for over a century. This now crumbling complex on the Guadalupe River began its life in the late 1800s as a watermill to provide power for a local cotton gin. However, this place is much more than just a beautiful abandoned building by the river. It's a fragment of the remains of a forgotten ghost town that was once known as Oak Forest, Texas. The town's origins are traced back to the 1870s, shortly after the end of the Civil War. A post office opened at Oak Forest in 1877, and it remained in service until 1925. In 1892, the town's population of 100 had semi-weekly mail delivery and was served by a general store, a wagon maker, a blacksmith, a gin, and a hotel. By 1896, Oak Forest reported 200 residents, including a physician and a music teacher, and a community telephone was located in a J.J. Bradbury's general store. Then there was also this majestic dam and water mill that supplied power for a cotton gin. The mill was damaged in 1935 during a flood and was subsequently rebuilt and repurposed as a hydroelectric power plant. Today, only a few fragments remain of the once bustling community of Oak Forest, including an abandoned general store, several crumbling homes, and the now forgotten former water mill and power plant by the Guadalupe River, which is now completely overgrown and in the process of being consumed by the elements. Number 15. Port Sullivan. Port Sullivan was founded in 1851 on a low bluff by the Brazos River. The town benefited from river navigation and grew to include stores, a sawmill, a college, and eventually a population of over 1,000. In 1843, the steamboat Mustang traveled upriver as far as the bluff, demonstrating the possibility of steam navigation to this point. Steamboats in Galveston advertised that through bills of lading would be issued on shipments up the Brazos to Port Sullivan. By 1852, Port Sullivan had a population of 200, and it boasted 4 stores, 1 circular sawmill, 2 or 3 warehouses, and a post office. Port Sullivan's population probably reached its highest point in the late 1860s. Then, throughout the late 1860s and 1870s, railway construction in the area reduced the importance of steamboat transportation, on which Port Sullivan was very dependent. The town declined even further when bypassed by railroads, and by the 1890s, the town had faded away completely. Number 14. Old Bluffton. Below Lake Buchanan's beautiful idyllic surface hides a dark, watery secret. There is an entire ghost town sitting at the bottom of the lake. Founded on dry land in 1852, this settlement, known as Bluffton, Texas, was one of the first towns ever founded in Texas Hill Country. Its post office was established in 1873, and by 1883, Bluffton was a lively town supporting many businesses, including hotels, saloons, and a cotton gin. Things were looking up for this modest but growing settlement. However, everything changed with the construction of the Buchanan Dam in the 1930s, which effectively doomed the town of Bluffton to gradually sink and disappear below the waters of the newly formed lake. Thus, families here had to begin preparing for the slow but inevitable rise of the water levels, which would gradually consume their homes, their town, and their very way of life. The old town of Bluffton now lies at the bottom of Lake Buchanan and only becomes visible during times of severe drought. Number 13. Benton City. Benton City was settled in 1876 and was granted a post office that same year. By 1878, the town had a Masonic lodge, the Benton City Institute, and its own newspaper. The Benton City Cemetery was established in 1870, and it contains some fascinating bits of history. Here, at this abandoned, overgrown cemetery, lie the remains of pioneers, as well as veterans of Indian warfare, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, and other historical conflicts. Unfortunately, the town suffered a severe financial blow in 1881 when it was bypassed by the International Great Northern Railroad. By 1904, the population was down to just over 300 residents, and 10 years later, it was down to 200. The Benton City School closed in the mid-1930s, and today, only a few ruins and the Benton City Cemetery are all that's left from Benton's golden age. Number 12. Texon. Deep in the parched, seemingly lifeless deserts of West Texas lie the ruins of a ghost town forgotten by time. It's difficult to believe that about 100 years ago, this was the epicenter of an oil boom, with the settlement housing a population of approximately 1,200. Located about 95 miles west of San Angelo, Texas, the town of Texon originated around May 28th of 1923, when oil was discovered in the area. The town was named for the Texon Oil and Land Company, which drilled the Santa Rita, the first successful oil well in the Permian Basin. Texon was considered a model oil community, and it boasted a post office, stores, shops, a school, a physician, a dentist, a hospital, a theater, a park, a well-known baseball team, and many facilities for recreation. As many as 2,000 people lived here. Boosters claimed up to 10,000, manning the drilling, a gasoline plant, an oil treating plant, and other operations. Eventually, the oil company running the town chose not to maintain Texon any longer, and in 1986 the post office was closed. The site of Texon now remains all but abandoned up to this day. Number 11. New Gulf. The story of New Gulf begins in 1909, when the Gulf Sulphur Company was formed to exploit the newly discovered sulfur deposit in the Big Hill Salt Dome near Matagorda, Texas. Besides building a sulfur plant in 1928, the company also built an entire town for its employees and named it New Gulf, Texas. About 400 houses with 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms each were constructed here and leased to employees. At the town's zenith, it had as many as 15 businesses. The population of New Gulf peaked in 1940 at 1,586. However, the New Gulf sulfur plant began to decline in the late 1950s and early 1960s, which led to layoffs of New Gulf employees. Today, the New Gulf sulfur plant is all but abandoned, and its nearby former company town of New Gulf is now included in the long list of Texas ghost towns. Number 10. Rayner. The old Rayner Courthouse was built in 1891 in a town that no longer exists called Rayner, Texas. Back then, however, there were big plans for this town, which eventually even became the county seat for a short time. The town had several general stores, a photography studio, a barber shop, a printing shop, and even water hydrants. Eventually, Rayner also received a cotton gin, a grain mill, and a schoolhouse. By 1892, things seemed to be going swimmingly for the new town, and it had actually grown to a population of about 250. However, an election held on June 4th of 1898 saw the nearby town of Aspermont become the new county seat by a vote of 145 to 114, spelling the beginning of the end for the town of Rayner. Most Rayner businesses soon moved to Aspermont, and this town rapidly declined. The post office was discontinued on June 30th of 1906, and by 1910, the town was largely abandoned. Little remains of Rayner now except for its old courthouse and the Rayner Cemetery. Number 9. Glen Rio. Glen Rio is a forgotten ghost town that straddles both sides of the state line dividing Texas and New Mexico. The community was founded as a railroad town in 1903 on what used to be part of the Ozark Trail, which eventually transformed into the historical Route 66. By the 1930s, U.S. Route 66 was a paved 2-lane road served locally by several filling stations, a restaurant, and a motel, and the road was even widened in the 1950s. A Texaco station and a diner were constructed on the Texas side of the town using the Art Moderne architectural style. Faced with this modest but locally significant economic boom, it must have looked like this town might be going places. However, in 1955, the small town suffered a blow when the Rock Island Depot was closed. A few years later, Glen Rio's fatal blow came in 1975, when the town was bypassed by Interstate 40 and thus doomed to extinction. The remains of the town now include the ruins of the Courtyard Motel and related Texas Longhorn Cafe and Phillips 66 service station, the post office, the old Route 66 roadbed, a few homes, and several other crumbling structures. Number 8. Fowlerton. Fowlerton is named for two brothers who settled the community around 1910. Things looked promising at the beginning. They had a river for irrigation and a railroad to take produce to the market. By October 1911, the town included 2 hotels and 3 stores, as well as telephones, miles of streets, and 1,200 Fowlerites. By 1914, nearly 2,000 people were comfortably enjoying life here by the Frio River. However, after 1917, a severe drought set the entire area behind, and people started moving to greener and wetter pastures. By 1949, the population had declined to only 300 residents, and by the mid-1960s, it was only 200. Now, all that's left of this once up-and-coming town are a few rough streets and the abandoned ruins of a church, the school, and several crumbling homes. Number 7. Frio City. Deep in the vast, parched emptiness of the Texas desert lies a crumbling jail that housed many famous and infamous names. But this isn't just a building. These are the remnants of an entire lost Texas ghost town named Frio City, which was frequented at times by several historical characters, including the infamous outlaws themselves. Yes, Bonnie and Clyde. Frio City was originally laid out by A.L. Odin in 1871, and it became the first county seat of Frio County on that very same year. The first Frio County courthouse was built in 1872, and not long after that, this now abandoned stone jail was also built. The jail eventually came to house several famed outlaws, such as Sam Bass, Jesse James, Frank James, and writer William Sidney Porter, also known by his pen name, O. Henry. Bonnie and Clyde are also known to have frequented the town to buy groceries and perform other errands, and it's said that their hideout was located nearby. By the 1880s, Frio Town was still thriving, with its population hovering close to 1,500. However, Frio City was bypassed by the railroad, a fatal blow from which it would never recover. By 1890, the population had fallen to 100, and by 1990, all that remained of the once bustling Frio City was the Frio Town Cemetery and the ruins of the original courthouse and jail, now on private property, as well as some foundations and stone chimneys of the homes of the original settlers. Number 6. Catarina. Welcome to the remains of another town forgotten by time. This is the ghost town of Catarina. The name of Catarina has been associated with the region since at least 1778. Legend holds that it's the name of a Mexican woman killed by Indians in the area. By 1910, there was a small community at the location. Soon, a bunkhouse, a commissary, a hotel, and a post office were built. In addition, a few blocks past the antique store is the partially overgrown Catarina School. By 1929, Catarina had between 1,000 and 2,500 residents, a bank, at least 2 grocery stores, a lumber company, and a bakery. However, short supplies of water, marketing problems, and the Great Depression slowly but surely drained the town's population. By 1931, the population had dropped to 592, and many of its businesses had been forced to close. By 1990, the population had dropped down even further to 45. Today, this town's main residents are only the deer, rabbits, snakes, and other wildlife that roam freely throughout the desolate dirt roads of Catarina. Number 5. Indianola. The port city of Indianola was founded in August of 1846, initially named Indian Point. In a short time, Indianola achieved the rank of the second port of Texas, rivaling the likes of Galveston and New Orleans. With a population of more than 5,000, Indianola was at the peak of her prosperity when it was suddenly struck by a severe hurricane in 1875. The town was rebuilt, but then almost immediately obliterated by the hurricane of August 20th of 1886 and the accompanying fire. The damage was so severe that by 1887, the site had been abandoned. Today, under the murky water of Matagorda Bay, you can sometimes spot the faint outline of a shadowy structure. No, you're not seeing things. This is the legendary sunken courthouse of Indianola, which was lost beneath the waves close to a century ago. These very walls that we're now exploring provided men, women, and children with a reliable shelter from the relentless, cruel winds of Mother Nature, saving their lives. Although most of the building has long since crumbled away, you can still see the distinct outline of what's left of its outer walls and even some of its interior walls. Number 4. Silver. The story of Silver, Texas begins with its founding in the 1870s as a humble ranching town. A Thomas J. Wiley established the first post office in 1890, and a one-room school opened in the community that same year. At this point, Silver was still a very small town on the map, with a reported population of only 10 from 1910 to 1940. However, in 1946, the Sun Oil Company discovered oil on an Allen Jameson's property, about a mile from the town's schoolhouse, and they moved quickly to cash in. By July of 1949, the company had established 59 producing oil wells in the Jameson oil field. Before long, Silver became one of the county's largest towns, with an estimated 1,000 residents, most of them living in camps established by the oil company. The small school was replaced by a $1 million complex, while the town also had 3 churches, a company recreation hall, 2 cafes, a gasoline station, and a grocery store. However, in the mid-19 1960s, oil production in the field began to decline, and the Sun Oil Company discontinued most of its operations in the area. Thus, slowly but surely, most of the houses and businesses at the town were deserted, left behind to be reclaimed by the elements. Today, ominous, haunting, and bullet-riddled structures litter the ghost town's ruins, with vegetation having almost completely engulfed many of the buildings. Number 3. Shafter. The ghost town of Shafter, Texas is a classic example of life after people, with dozens or even hundreds of crumbling buildings, roads, and mines hidden away in the wild mountains of West Texas. The town was founded before 1885. In the early 1900s, 6 silver mines were in operation near Shafter, while the town itself was booming, with a population as high as 4,000 in 1940. However, in the 1940s, local businesses faced increased production costs, a shortage of miners, and attempts to unionize the workforce, and they were eventually compelled to shut down their operation. Today, the site is all but abandoned. Many of the buildings, decades or even centuries old, seem to have been frozen in time, providing a stunning sight to behold as they blend in with the wild, rugged mountain ranges in the background. Number 2. Villa de la Mina. Deep in the arid deserts of West Texas lies a hidden gem with deep historic roots. Villa de la Mina is an entire abandoned 62-acre settlement that was originally founded in the 1900s. Around the villa, you'll find about 20 buildings still standing, each one with rock walls and cement floors. In addition, this site also sits on an extensive network of lost mines and caverns, including the largest mine in the region, which still contains the remains of an old railroad track heading right into its entrance. During its prime, Villa de la Mina was a thriving mining hub with its own jail, feed and grain store, dynamite shack, and cantina. Some of the other buildings and amenities in the Villa de la Mina included a 2-story hotel, private cabins, several fireplaces, and a pool. In addition, there are also reminders that the villa was built 100 years ago, such as the reptile holding tank, a reinforced door dynamite shack, and an outdoor oven. However, those are just the buildings near the center of the town. The surroundings of this lost ghost town also include the remains of its abandoned mine, riddled with a vast network of shafts, some of which extend into a massive subterranean cavern system. Number 1. Terlingua. Terlingua is a one-of-a-kind ghost town in the United States. In the mid-1880s, the discovery of cinnabar, from which the metal mercury is extracted, brought miners to the area, creating a city of 2,000 people. The community of Terlingua grew up around the mining industry, and the local inhabitants of this once thriving town had a company-owned commissary and hotel, excellent housing for the time, a school, a company doctor, telephone service, a dependable water supply, and 3 times a week mail delivery. Prior to the use of mechanized vehicles in the early 1930s, the mule-drawn wagon trains that delivered the quicksilver to the railroad at Alpine and Marathon also kept the settlement well supplied. However, after falling quicksilver prices forced the local mines to close by 1947, the population fell dramatically, leaving a population of just close to 78 today. Nowadays, for the most part, the only remnants of Terlingua's glory days are countless abandoned buildings, several abandoned mines, and the Terlingua Cemetery, with its earliest grave dating back to 1903, when the cinnabar mining operations began. Truly, the town of Terlingua is a place unlike any other, where you can go back in time and immerse yourself in a wilder era when settlers, outlaws, and cowboys of the Old West roamed through these very streets. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. Please keep in mind that this isn't necessarily a list of all the abandoned ghost towns in Texas, just the top 20 in my opinion. Do you think I missed something? Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed the video and would like to explore along with me in my future adventures. I'll see you on the next one.